So today we're going to learn about how to evaluate sources, what sources are, and how to evaluate sources to make sure that they're appropriate sources for our research process. This is the same system or series of steps that you would use regardless of what type of research you're doing. Argument, persuasion, just a standard research paper. So let's jump in. When you are writing, you need to be acting like a judge. You need to be thinking about and evaluating each of your possible sources to make sure that they're containing the best and most appropriate information for your paper. Because if you're not doing that and you're finding bad sources, your paper is going to suffer as a result. You're going to have trouble supporting your claims. So as you research, you should have as many sources as possible. And you want to be looking at newspaper articles and magazine articles, which you can get online. You want to be looking at websites, although you want to be very careful what types of websites, so I'll talk about that today, as well as perhaps videos and audio clips. But again, you want to be very careful who is presenting the information in those video or audio clips. So again, when I talk about a source, I mean something that you can use. Newspaper article, magazine article, website, video or audio clip that will help you to find your information to support your claim. So you have to evaluate each source that you find to see if you should use it in your work. This means reading and thinking carefully about how trustworthy or reliable your source is, and whether the source gives you the information you need and enough of the information you need to prove your claim. We are going to learn today a strategy called the 4 R's that will help us to learn whether or not we are making smart choices with our sources. The first R is relevant. So if something is relevant, it connects or relates to whatever is going on. So if a source that you choose is relevant, it's going to relate to your topic. It provides specific information that helps you support your claim. Ask yourself, does this source have enough information and evidence about my topic and claim? If your topic is about how the home computer changed the way that people receive information, which of these sources might be the best to use? So, of course, if you were trying to choose how the home computer changed it, you would choose the second one about Apple computers and Steve Jobs because he's an expert and because it's a broader source. The second R is recent. So recent means something that is happening within a short span of time from when you are presently looking for your research. So a source's research is recent if it contains the latest information about your topic. Even if you are researching an event that happened hundreds of years ago, you still need to make sure you have the most current information. I tell my students that they should only be using sources that have been published within the last 5 years. If you want to write about how a new video game was created and you're doing a research project about that, which of the following might be the best source of information for you? So obviously, the first one would be better. 7.0 would mean it was probably a more recent. You do not want to take something from 1999. It would not be recent. The third R in the 4 R's to evaluate sources is representative. This one can be very, very complicated to students, but this is probably one of the most important. A source is representative if it explains many different viewpoints on a topic. So it gives you the pros and the cons. It gives you an overview. Or if the author does have one particular opinion, it at least gives you some counter arguments and rebuttals. You never want to present only one side of an argument in your work. Therefore, you don't only want to read one side of an argument in your work. So if source is representative, it's going to give you both sides of the argument. If only one side of the argument is presented, or if the piece is overly persuasive, meaning it's picking and choosing what it's using as evidence and information that it's giving you, you need to be careful because your source can be biased. So let's look at these two sources about endangered species. A study on current threats to animal species by an international wildlife organization, or an advertisement for a big game hunting safari. Which one is more representative? If you chose the first one, you were correct. Because they are not invested necessarily in one side or the other, they're more fair and representative. The next R is reliable. If something is reliable, it's trustworthy. If something is reliable, it means it's worthy of being listened to. It's giving you accurate and objective information, which means that it can be representative, but it also can be trusted. So you want to, in this case, spend some real quality time researching your author. You want to do a Google search on your author to make sure that your author is who he or she says he is, and that they're actually an expert in whatever the field is that you're researching. There very often articles have an about page where they'll give you a little bit of information about the author. If you have that, you want to make sure you look at that. Otherwise, you want to make sure you do a little bit of a Google search on the author to make sure that the author is an expert and can be trusted. So let's assume that we were looking at acne treatments. Which source would be more reliable? A website created by a dermatologist or a commercial for the newest product? Obviously a dermatologist, because that's a doctor who studies it, whereas a commercial would try to sell you and get your money. Not reliable. So next, we just talked briefly. Let me just push this through. Excuse me. Okay, so there are many different types of websites that you're going to be looking at. You're going to be using the internet. You're going to be asking yourself, is the information reliable? Is it relevant? Is it representative? Is it recent? Okay. Unfortunately, no one's really checking the information on the internet, so you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to make sure when you're trying to decide whether a website is reliable and recent and representative, whether or not it meets those qualifications is going to have to be something that you look at very critically. There are 5 different types of web pages, and they're not all the same. So you have personal pages, you have advocacy pages, which are groups that are trying to promote a cause. You have commercial pages, which are going to be a .com. Advocacy pages are often a .org. And then you have informational pages, which can be a .org or a .gov. Sometimes they can also be a .com occasionally, but not quite as frequently. And then you have news pages, which are very often a .com because they're put out by news organizations that are businesses. Not all of these pages are equal. If you find a personal page, you want to ignore it. You want to get right off of it. Those are not reliable. They may be a person may know something about the topic, but they don't tend to be the most reliable or representative. You want to be very careful if there's a lot of backslashes or, different font in the title, that you have a personal web page. Okay, so they may look like these. The next up is advocacy pages. Depending, sometimes these pages can be very helpful. If you're looking and doing an article about the dangers of smoking, the American Lung Society may help you, but keep in mind it is very biased. Commercial pages, you want to skim right over. If you find a page that's trying to sell you something, get off of it as soon as possible. Be careful though, because sometimes newspaper articles use their advertisement in their margins, but if there's actually something being sold on the page, get off of that page. Essentially what you want to be looking at is informational web pages, and you want to be looking at news web pages. So ESPN, US News and World Report, Time Magazine, things like that. And those will very often still have a .com, and they may have an ad on the side, but they tend to be more responsible and reliable. So next up, what we're going to do this next piece together. We're going to use the notes that you took to look at whether or not something meets our criteria.